May it please the court. Madam Court Reporter, Clerk, Bailiff, Ms. Johnson, Ms. O'Connor, Mr. Summers, gentlemen of the jury. You are performing a most important civic duty and privilege being here. We need you here. The next 5 days will be transformative to you, both in the legal system to hopefully appreciate what our judicial system is and the freedoms that we enjoy. And also, you're going to leave with a feeling of despair in hearing this very tragic story about a family that fell apart. As you hear, these folks were married for 16 years. These folks had 5 children, ranging from teenagers, 14-year-olds, down to a toddler, 3 years old. 5 children. The marriage was falling apart. The parties were separating. But there was nothing that said that the divorce was acrimonious. Didn't appear that they were fighting over anything. Children, property, assets. And they had been estranged for a while. It is true that there was an injunction against Mr. Summers, but there was also an injunction against Mrs. Summers. Now, we trust in the collective wisdom of the jury, as we discussed on voir dire. And again, you all promise that as we sit here today, Mr. Summers enjoys the presumption of innocence which you give him. The story that Ms. Johnson gave you is a story. It is the state's theory of what happened. A lot of it is true. A lot of it is also verified by Mr. Summers when he makes his statements. But we also have to follow the law. Look at the charges that are against him and see if the facts that you hear from that witness stand match up with the law as you're going to get instructed from the court. He's charged with attempted murder. You heard some information, not evidence. You heard some story about how that was happening. How did it end? You heard some statements about crimes of kidnapping, when exactly that occurred, and what was the motive of the kidnapping, what was the purpose of the kidnapping, if there was a kidnapping. There was sexual activity. Whether you call it sexual assault depends, again, is it a crime? What happened in that situation? It's charged with grand theft, stealing the automobile. Seeing that that was actually the motive for all of this. It's charged with child neglect. I would say that these poor children that have to go through this tumultuous divorces, and then when situations get out of hand, the children always suffer. They have to come in today and testify to, they go through this event that happened between them. There are some inconsistencies through all of this. You will see there are times, she says, the testimony from Mrs. Summers will be that she was tied up, that she couldn't get away, that she was forced, that she had no alternative. But there's some inconsistencies. You will see a McDonald's video where she's not tied up, where she's assisting, mixing the ketchup, mustard, getting things together. When you get to the sexual assault, you have to make some decisions about the distinctions between consent and acquiescence. Most certainly, an individual who is being abducted and decides to do anything to stay alive, that would be acquiescence, and I would agree that that's not consent. But the question is Is that the situation in this case? They weren't divorced yet. She was estranged from him. She was living in her own house. He was living in his house. It appears that they were exchanging the children without any difficulty. And as I said before, it didn't appear that there was any acrimonious in the divorce itself. So I wonder what was the motivating factor for all of this. And then we've got a period of time, 3 days, where they're in the car. Only them. There's a period of time where they have the Walgreens incident. And we talk about that, the circumstances surrounding that. And yes, I agree. This is not a police-generated case. It's not where the police went out and got search warrants or wiretaps, like in the drug cases or racketeering cases, things like that. The police got a call from 911, and they followed through on a 911 call looking for Dr. So the things that the police did to look and find these people, we have no quarrel with. But I would then suggest Mr. Summers is in the hospital. You will hear that he had cut himself. He was in the hospital. You have to say, what were the circumstances in that? And then a detective came in and got an interview, a taped interview. You will see some photographs. Compare it against the tape. A picture's worth 1,000 words. When you hear the 1,000 words, you have to question, why is this being made? What is this being made? What is the circumstances surrounding this? Can this be trusted? Is this trustworthy? And then you're going to have a balancing act with a bunch of different competing theories, which is why we're here. If we all agreed on everything, we wouldn't have a trial. Traffic accident cases, somebody says the light was red, somebody else says the light was green. You have to decide what the facts were. And you're to do so with the rules that you have been given. Mr. Summers, as a citizen, has the right, the constitutional protection, to be examined again, to look at this again through the eyes of the jury of his peers, citizens as yourself. Not law enforcement, not the state attorney's office, not Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office, not the judge. He's decided by a jury of his peers, which is what we're doing. And that means if you keep an open mind, if you wait till the end of all the evidence and wait for your deliberations with the collective wisdom of all the other jurors, and you question, is this right? You will be told you can believe everything a witness says. You can believe most of what a witness says. You can believe some of what a witness says. You can believe none of what a witness says. And that applies both for all of the state witnesses, and it also applies for Mr. Summers should he decide to take the stand. That's his decision. We've already said, and you've heard from the court, that if he decides not to take the stand, you're not to draw any inference from it. That is his privilege and constitutional right to do so. And that you've promised that you will judge the case only from what you hear on the witness stand. When you do that, I believe as you go through each of these crimes, I believe the evidence will show that he is not guilty of the crimes of attempted murder, kidnapping, grand theft. The child neglect charges, I will leave for you to decide. Again, it was so sad of the story to have the children in the middle of all of this from both sides. But we want to make sure that you keep your honor, that you have oath as a juror, all the admonitions from the court, not to talk to anybody about this, to listen only from the evidence of the witness stand, to talk amongst yourselves, gather the facts, put the facts together with the law, make a conclusion if a crime was committed, what crime that was. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Marchese. Ladies and gentlemen, I usually take our morning break at 10:30. Since it is 10:20, I'm going to go ahead and take our morning break a little bit early before I allow the state